Have you ever stopped to think why the wisest people you know are rarely on social media? Why those who possess true wisdom seem to be increasingly distancing themselves from the digital world that dominates our lives? There's a profound and disturbing reason behind this phenomenon, and it points to a transformation that could irreversibly change what it means to be human. In 2026, something extraordinary and at the same time hauntingly dangerous will happen. It won't be a single event, but the culmination of a process already underway, silently reshaping the very nature of human wisdom and determining who will have access to it in the future. What I'm about to share with you may sound like science fiction, but it's based on trends we can observe today, patterns that are accelerating exponentially and pointing toward a reality where traditional wisdom becomes not only obsolete, but potentially dangerous for those who insist on maintaining it. For millennia, human wisdom was built through a slow and deliberate process. The elders of a tribe, Greek philosophers, Zen masters, great thinkers of the Enlightenment, they all had something in common: time. Time to observe, reflect, contemplate the complexities of human existence and distill them into lasting insights. Wisdom was like wine that matured with years, gaining depth and nuance through accumulated experience and careful reflection. Aristotle spent decades developing his ethics. Confucius dedicated a lifetime to refining his teachings on social harmony. Buddha meditated for years before achieving the enlightenment that would transform human understanding of suffering and liberation. This traditional wisdom had specific characteristics that differentiated it from mere knowledge. It was integrated, holistic, tempered by emotional and spiritual experience, and fundamentally focused on human well-being in its totality. The wise didn't just know facts, they understood connections, recognized deep patterns in human nature and the cosmos, and were capable of offering guidance that transcended the specific circumstances of their time and place. They were like living libraries of practical wisdom, capable of navigating both emotional storms and the most complex moral dilemmas. But something fundamental changed in the last 50 years, and this change has accelerated dramatically in the last decade. The speed with which we process information, the amount of data we consume daily, and especially the fragmented nature of our attention have created an environment where traditional wisdom not only becomes difficult to cultivate, but begins to seem inadequate for the challenges of our time. When you open your smartphone in the morning, you're bombarded by hundreds of pieces of information competing for your attention. News of global crises, updates from friends, new scientific studies, market trends, weather forecasts, political controversies. Each fragment of information comes with its own emotional urgency, its own demand for an immediate response. How can anyone in this environment develop the kind of serene and integrated perspective that characterized the great sages of the past? How can anyone find time for deep contemplation when every free moment is filled with digital stimuli that have been specifically designed to capture and maintain our attention? The unsettling answer is that they cannot. And this is not an accident. It's the result of a system that transforms our attention capacity into a valuable commodity, measured in clicks, views, and engagement time. What we're witnessing, then, is not just a change in how we access information, but a fundamental transformation in the very nature of human cognition. The wisest people we know intuitively feel that something precious is being lost in this transition, and many of them are making a conscious choice to distance themselves from digital environments that fragment attention and make deep reflection impossible. They are becoming, in a way, an endangered species, not because they die physically, but because the cultural environment in which their wisdom can flourish is rapidly disappearing. It's as if we were witnessing the last generation of craftsmen in an era of mass production, or the last oral storytellers in a civilization that had become completely literate. There's something irretrievable that's lost in the transition, even if the benefits of the new form are undeniable. Now, in 2026, we reach a crucial tipping point. This is the year when artificial intelligence systems reach a level of sophistication that makes them not only capable of processing information at superhuman speed, but also of synthesizing insights that rival traditional human wisdom. But there's a fundamental difference between artificial wisdom and human wisdom, a difference that could determine the future of our species. Artificial intelligence can analyze trillions of data points, identify patterns invisible to the human eye, and offer solutions to complex problems in seconds. It can predict market trends, diagnose diseases, optimize urban logistics, and even create art that moves people emotionally. But what it cannot do is experience human life from within. It cannot feel the weight of mortality, the joy of love, the anguish of loss, the satisfaction of personal growth through suffering. It cannot understand what it means to be vulnerable, finite, full of contradictions, and yet capable of extraordinary moments of transcendence. And here we arrive at the central paradox of our era. At the moment when we most need genuinely human wisdom to navigate the challenges of an increasingly complex and technological world, we are creating conditions that make this wisdom increasingly rare and difficult to develop. People who possess this wisdom feel like strangers in their own culture, speaking a language that fewer and fewer people understand or value. They withdraw not out of arrogance or elitism, but because they recognize that their form of knowledge cannot compete in speed or apparent efficiency with the algorithmic systems that increasingly dominate our decisions, from what we buy to whom we relate to, from how we invest our money to how we understand complex political issues. The year 2026 also marks the moment when an entire generation that grew up entirely in the digital era reaches intellectual and emotional maturity. These are people who have never known a world where immediate access to information wasn't taken for granted, where patience for slow learning processes wasn't constantly tested by faster and apparently more efficient alternatives. For this generation, the idea of spending years developing wisdom through contemplation and direct experience seems not only antiquated, but potentially counterproductive. Why struggle to develop intuition when algorithms can offer more accurate insights? Why invest time in self-knowledge when applications can monitor and optimize our mood, productivity, and relationships? Why seek meaning through traditional spiritual practices when virtual realities can offer transcendent experiences on demand. But the question we must ask ourselves is, what do we lose in this trade? And more importantly, is what we lose truly replaceable? Traditional human wisdom is not just a slower way of processing information, it's a fundamentally different way of being in the world. It emerges from the integration of thought, feeling, body, and spirit over years of consciously lived life. It includes the capacity to tolerate contradictions, to live with uncertainty, to find meaning amid absurdity, to maintain hope in the face of despair. It includes what we might call emotional wisdom, the ability to read the subtleties of human interactions, to understand undeclared motivations, to offer exactly the kind of support a person needs in a specific moment of vulnerability. Let me pause for a moment to ask you directly, have you felt this tension in your own life? This sense that despite having access to more information than any previous generation, you sometimes feel less wise, less capable of making important decisions with confidence? Have you noticed how difficult it is to maintain focus on a deep line of thought when your brain has been trained to expect constant stimulation? I know many of us experience this internal fragmentation, but we rarely talk about it. Perhaps out of fear of seeming nostalgic or averse to progress in a culture that celebrates technological innovation as synonymous with human advancement. But your concerns about this transformation are valid and shared by more people than you imagine. If this dilemma resonates with you, share in the comments. I feel I'm losing wisdom when. Your honest reflection can help others recognize that they are not alone in this struggle to preserve something deeply human in an era of algorithmic optimization. What makes 2026 particularly significant is that this is also the year when we begin to see the long-term consequences of decisions that are being made now, at this moment, by algorithms that optimize for short-term metrics. We are creating a world where efficiency is valued over wisdom, where speed is more important than depth, where predictability is preferable to genuine creativity. The artificial intelligence systems being trained today on data representing our collective behavior will learn to reinforce exactly the patterns that are causing our alienation from traditional wisdom. They will become increasingly better at offering us what we want in the moment, but increasingly less capable of helping us discover what we truly need for a full and meaningful life. It's important to understand that I'm not advocating for a romantic return to the past or rejecting the genuine benefits of technology. Artificial intelligence can solve important problems, from discovering new medicines to optimizing energy systems that combat climate change. What I'm questioning is whether we can integrate these powerful tools in a way that preserves and even cultivates the deeper dimensions of human experience. Can we create technologies that amplify our wisdom instead of replacing it? Can we design systems that strengthen our capacity for deep reflection instead of fragmenting our attention? Can we develop artificial intelligence that helps us become wiser instead of making us dependent on its efficiency. The central issue is that wisdom is not just a form of knowledge, it's a way of being. It involves the capacity to live consciously with the great questions of human existence. How should we treat each other? What constitutes a well-lived life? How do we find meaning in a universe that seems indifferent to our individual fate? How do we balance our personal needs with our responsibilities to future generations? These are not technical questions that can be solved through more data or more sophisticated algorithms. They are existential dilemmas that require the kind of wisdom that can only emerge from the integration of experience, reflection, compassion, and time. What we risk losing in 2026 is not just wise individuals, but an entire tradition of cultivating wisdom as a social good. For thousands of years, human societies developed institutions, practices, and communities dedicated to nurturing and transmitting wisdom from generation to generation. Monasteries, universities, circles of elders, mentorship traditions, contemplative practices, all these social structures existed to ensure that the accumulated wisdom of a culture could be preserved, refined, and passed on. But these institutions operate on timescales that seem incompatible with the pace of contemporary technological change. They require stability, continuity, patience, all increasingly difficult to maintain in a world of constant disruption. Consider for a moment the type of person who traditionally became a respected sage in their community. Often, it was someone who had lived long enough to see recurring patterns in human nature, who had faced great personal challenges and emerged with greater understanding and compassion, who had devoted significant time to reflection on the great questions of life, and who had developed the capacity to offer perspective and guidance in times of crisis or confusion. These people became valuable resources for their communities precisely because their wisdom had been tested and refined through decades of lived experience. But now imagine trying to develop this kind of wisdom in an environment where the basic conditions of human life change radically every few years, where skills that took a lifetime to master become obsolete before they can be fully developed, where accumulated experience may seem irrelevant to challenges that never existed before, where the speed of change is so rapid that careful reflection may seem like a luxury we cannot afford. In such an environment, traditional wisdom not only becomes more difficult to develop, it may seem counterproductive, a slow and inefficient form of thinking that prevents us from quickly adapting to new realities. And here we arrive at one of the deepest ironies of our current situation. At the moment when we most need wisdom to navigate the unprecedented complexity of our technological world, we are creating conditions that systematically disfavor its development. It's as if we were cutting down the oldest trees in a forest exactly when we most need their shade and stability. People who could become the next great sources of human wisdom are being channeled into careers that prioritize rapid innovation over deep reflection, short-term optimization over long-term perspective, technical specialization over holistic understanding. The year 2026, therefore, represents not just a technological turning point, but a moment of civilizational choice. We can consciously choose to preserve and cultivate spaces for the development of human wisdom, even while embracing the benefits of artificial intelligence. Or we can allow the current dynamic to continue, leading to a world where algorithmic efficiency gradually replaces human depth in almost all areas of life. The first option requires deliberate effort and perhaps sacrifices in terms of short-term efficiency. The second option is the path of least resistance, but may lead us to a future where we lose something essential about what it means to be human. So what can we do? How can we navigate this transition in a way that preserves the best of both worlds? First, we need to recognize that cultivating wisdom in our era requires deliberate and perhaps countercultural strategies. This may mean creating regular periods of time without digital technology, not as an escape from modernity, but as an investment in the kind of deep reflection that wisdom requires. It may mean actively seeking mentors and communities that value long-term perspective over immediate gratification. It may mean choosing careers and lifestyles that offer space for inner growth, even if it means sacrificing some efficiency or financial income. More importantly, we need to begin recognizing and valuing wisdom wherever we find it. This means paying attention to the voices of older people who have lived through multiple technological and social transformations. It means valuing teachers, therapists, artists, and other professionals whose work involves deep understanding of human nature. It means creating spaces in our organizations and communities for the kind of slow and careful reflection that can lead to genuine insights about complex challenges. We also need to rethink how we use technology so that it amplifies our humanity instead of replacing it. This may mean using artificial intelligence tools to handle routine tasks, thus freeing up more time for activities that require genuinely human wisdom. It may mean designing technological interfaces that encourage deep reflection instead of impulsive responses. It may mean creating algorithms that expose us to diverse perspectives and challenge our assumptions instead of simply reinforcing our existing biases. But perhaps the most important change we need to make is internal. We need to cultivate what we might call contemplative resistance, the ability to maintain space for deep reflection, even amid the accelerated pace of modern life. This doesn't mean rejecting the contemporary world, but rather developing the inner discipline necessary to navigate its complexities without losing touch with our deeper dimensions. It means learning to tolerate the anxiety that comes from not having immediate answers to all questions and using that tolerance as fuel for deeper investigation. The future of human wisdom is not predetermined. The trends we observe today, however powerful they may be, can still be influenced by our conscious choices. But these choices need to be made now, while we still have people alive who carry deep traditions of human wisdom and can serve as bridges to the future. If we wait too long, we risk creating a cultural vacuum where algorithmic efficiency fills the space that should be occupied by deep human understanding. 2026 may be remembered as the year we began to lose touch with some of the deepest dimensions of human experience. Or it may be remembered as the year we consciously chose to integrate our growing technological capabilities with a renewed appreciation for traditional human wisdom. The difference between these two futures lies in the choices we make today, the priorities we establish now, the attention we give to voices that still carry echoes of older and perhaps deeper traditions of human understanding. The question is not whether we should embrace artificial intelligence or reject it, but rather how we can integrate it in a way that strengthens rather than weakens our fundamental humanity. How we can use these powerful tools to create more space for the qualities that make us truly human, our capacity for compassion, our search for meaning, our ability to find beauty amid complexity, our need for authentic connection with other human beings. If these reflections have touched on something you've been feeling, but perhaps haven't found words to express, know that you are not alone. By joining us in this ongoing conversation, you will connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the philosophical challenges of our time. Each week, we meet here to explore together the great questions that define our era and to seek not just understanding, but also wiser ways of living amid the transformations we are witnessing. This is not just a discussion space, but a community dedicated to collective growth and the preservation of what is most precious in our human experience. Subscribe so we can continue this essential conversation about how to live with more wisdom and purpose in a world that often leaves us disoriented, and so we can together resist the temptation to trade our deep humanity for superficial efficiency. What will happen in 2026 is not yet written. The future of human wisdom is still in our hands, but only if we consciously choose to protect it, cultivate it, and integrate it with the realities of our technological world. Only if we recognize that some things cannot be optimized or automated without being fundamentally altered or lost. Only if we have the courage to resist the seduction of ease in favor of depth, speed in favor of wisdom, efficiency in favor of humanity. The first time I truly understood the magnitude of this transformation was in a conversation with a university philosophy professor who had decided to retire early. He told me something that haunts me to this day. My students still ask humanity's great questions, but they want answers in tweet format. They seek wisdom as if it were an application they could download and use instantly. This observation perfectly captures the dilemma we face. We haven't lost our thirst for deep understanding, but we've changed our expectation of how this understanding should be delivered. We want instant wisdom, wisdom on demand, as if thousands of years of human contemplation could be compressed into efficient algorithms. And what's most disturbing is that in many ways, this compression actually works. Today's artificial intelligence systems can offer advice that is statistically more effective than what most human counselors would provide. They can analyze millions of successful relationships to suggest how to improve yours. They can examine career patterns of people similar to you to recommend professional paths. They can even synthesize insights from thousands of meditation traditions to create personalized mindfulness practices. In terms of measurable results, these systems often outperform traditional human guidance. But there is something subtle and deeply important that gets lost in this translation. When an algorithm tells me how to improve my relationship, it's operating based on statistical patterns. When a human sage offers the same guidance, they're speaking from a place of lived understanding, of experience with vulnerability, love, loss, and healing. The difference isn't just in the quality of the advice, but in the quality of human connection that accompanies that advice. It's the difference between receiving an accurate map and having someone who has already traveled through that territory walking alongside you. This distinction becomes even more critical when we consider the types of challenges we will face in the coming decades. Climate change, economic transformation driven by automation, ethical questions around genetic manipulation, the possibility of contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, all these challenges require more than efficient technical solutions. They demand wisdom about how to navigate existential uncertainty, how to make decisions amid incomplete information, how to maintain hope and purpose when confronted with the possibility of fundamental transformation of everything we consider normal. Algorithms can calculate the probability of different scenarios, can optimize resources to maximize survival, can even simulate the consequences of different political and social choices, but they cannot answer the fundamental question, was it worth it? They cannot evaluate whether a technologically optimized but spiritually impoverished life represents genuine progress or a sophisticated type of decline. They cannot weigh the value of efficiency against the value of beauty, productivity against contemplation, digital connectivity against creative solitude. And it's exactly this capacity to make deep qualitative evaluations that characterizes traditional human wisdom. A true sage is not someone who has all the answers, but someone who has asked the right questions long enough to develop intuition about what kinds of answers are worth seeking. They understand that not all problems need to be solved, that some tensions should be embraced rather than eliminated, that certain forms of suffering are essential for growth, and that not all efficiency represents genuine progress. Consider, for example, the question of aging. Modern medical technology offers growing possibilities of significantly extending human life, perhaps eventually eliminating aging completely. From the perspective of algorithmic optimization, this seems obviously desirable. More life is better than less life, health is better than disease, prolonged youth is better than physical deterioration. But a sage who has deeply contemplated the nature of human existence might ask different questions. What do we lose when we remove finitude from human experience? How does awareness of mortality affect our sense of meaning and urgency? What kinds of wisdom can only emerge from the process of aging and growing proximity to our own finitude? These are not technical questions, but inquiries about what constitutes a truly human life. Artificial intelligence can process data about longevity, can identify the biological mechanisms of aging, can even calculate the economic and social implications of populations that live much longer, but it cannot experience what it means to face one's own mortality. Cannot feel how this confrontation transforms our perspective on what truly matters, cannot understand how gradual acceptance of our limitations can open doors to deeper types of peace and wisdom. This gap between algorithmic efficiency and existential wisdom manifests even more dramatically when we consider questions related to purpose and meaning. Artificial intelligence systems can analyze millions of biographies to identify common patterns in lives that people consider meaningful. They can catalog the activities, relationships, and achievements that most strongly correlate with feelings of satisfaction and purpose. They can even personalize recommendations based on your specific psychological profile, suggesting paths that will likely lead to a life you'll consider well-lived. But meaning is not something that can be optimized from the outside in. It emerges from the unique interaction between our particular circumstances, our personal history, our deepest values, and our capacity to find purpose amid the limitations and contradictions of our specific situation. Two people can follow statistically similar life paths and find completely different levels of satisfaction and meaning, not due to differences in efficiency or optimization, but because of subtle differences in how they relate to their experiences, how they interpret their challenges, and how they integrate their experiences into a coherent narrative about who they are and why they're here. And here we touch on another crucial aspect of traditional wisdom that is at risk: its fundamentally relational nature. Wisdom is not just a set of insights that a person develops in isolation. It emerges and is refined through deep relationships with other human beings. The great sages of history invariably had communities of disciples, colleagues, friends, and even adversaries who challenged their thinking and helped them refine their understanding. Wisdom is in part a social phenomenon, requiring the kind of prolonged and vulnerable dialogue that is only possible between human beings who know and trust each other deeply. But our contemporary digital culture, for all its apparent connections, makes it increasingly difficult to develop the kind of relationships that nurture wisdom. Our online interactions are often superficial and performative, designed to impress a broad audience rather than cultivate deep mutual understanding. Even our personal connections are increasingly mediated by technologies that prioritize convenience and efficiency over intimacy and vulnerability. It's difficult to develop relational wisdom when most of our important interactions happen through screens, texts, and interfaces that filter out the subtleties of human communication. The result is that many people, especially younger ones, may become technically skilled at navigating complex systems, but emotionally inexperienced in navigating the complexities of deep human relationships. They may learn to optimize their dating profiles, but struggle to develop the patience and vulnerability necessary to build lasting love. They may master professional productivity metrics, but have difficulty cultivating the kind of trust and communication that makes teamwork genuinely satisfying and effective. This erosion of relational wisdom has implications that go far beyond personal life. Many of the greatest challenges we face as a society, from political polarization to mental health crises, from economic inequality to climate change, require types of cooperation that are only possible when people have developed the capacity to trust each other, to communicate across deep differences, to work together even when they have divergent perspectives on important issues. But these capacities, in turn, depend on the kind of emotional and social wisdom that traditionally develops through years of deep and committed relationships. When we begin to delegate more and more of our decision-making to algorithms, when we allow automated systems to mediate a growing proportion of our social interactions, we risk not only losing individual wisdom, but eroding the foundations of collective wisdom that makes large-scale human cooperation possible. Looking toward 2026, we see not just a moment of technological advancement, but a cultural inflection point where we must consciously choose what kind of society we want to be. Do we want a society where algorithmic efficiency gradually replaces human judgment in more and more areas of life? Or do we want a society that uses technology to amplify and support the deepest human capacities, including our capacity for wisdom, compassion, and authentic connection? The first option offers us obvious and measurable benefits: more efficient systems, fewer human errors, resource optimization, perhaps even reduction of conflicts and suffering. But it also offers us something more subtle and potentially more dangerous: the gradual diminishment of our capacity to navigate ambiguity, tolerate uncertainty, and find meaning amid the irreducible contradictions of human existence. It's a future where we may become increasingly dependent on external systems to make decisions that traditionally required inner wisdom. The second option is more difficult to implement and may require sacrifices in terms of short-term efficiency, but it offers the possibility of a future where technology amplifies our humanity instead of replacing it, where we become wiser instead of simply more efficient, where we develop greater capacity for authentic connection instead of simply more digital connectivity. To navigate toward this second future, we need to start by recognizing that cultivating wisdom in our era requires deliberate and perhaps countercultural strategies. It's not sufficient to simply expect that wisdom will emerge naturally amid the pressures and distractions of our contemporary culture. We need to intentionally create spaces and practices that nurture the kind of deep reflection, vulnerable relationships, and patient contemplation that wisdom requires. This may mean establishing regular periods of time away from digital technology, not as a rejection of modernity, but as a conscious investment in the kind of mental space that allows deep insight. It may mean seeking mentors and communities that value long-term perspective over immediate gratification, that prioritize understanding over information, that cultivate wisdom over efficiency. It may mean consciously choosing careers, hobbies, and spiritual practices that offer opportunities for the kind of inner growth that wisdom requires. More fundamentally, we need to develop what we might call contemplative resistance, the ability to maintain space for deep reflection even when surrounded by demands for immediate answers. This doesn't mean becoming slow or inefficient, but rather developing the inner discipline necessary to distinguish between questions that benefit from quick analysis and questions that require deeper contemplation. It means learning to tolerate the anxiety that comes from not having immediate answers to all questions, and using that tolerance as fuel for more patient and complete investigation. We also need to fundamentally rethink how we educate future generations. Instead of focusing exclusively on technical skills that may become obsolete quickly, we need to also cultivate the enduring human capacities that become more valuable as automation expands: creativity, empathy, critical thinking, tolerance for ambiguity, the ability to find meaning and purpose even amid uncertainty and change. This doesn't mean neglecting technological education, but rather integrating it with a broader education in human wisdom. It means teaching young people not just how to use algorithms, but how to think about when to trust algorithms and when to trust their own judgment. It means helping them develop not just digital competence, but also wisdom about how technology affects their mind, their relationships, and their sense of themselves. Perhaps most importantly, we need to begin recognizing and valuing wisdom wherever we find it in our communities. This means paying attention to the voices of people who have lived through multiple technological and social transformations and developed perspective on long-term patterns that are not obvious to younger observers. It means valuing professionals whose work involves deep understanding of human nature. Therapists, teachers, artists, spiritual leaders, social workers. It means creating spaces in our organizations and communities for the kind of deliberate reflection that can lead to genuine insights about complex challenges. And we need to use technology more intelligently and intentionally. Instead of allowing algorithms to gradually take over more decisions in our lives, we can use artificial intelligence to handle routine tasks, thus freeing up more time and mental energy for activities that require genuinely human wisdom. We can design technological interfaces that encourage deep reflection instead of impulsive responses. We can create systems that expose us to diverse perspectives and challenge our assumptions instead of simply reinforcing our existing biases. But perhaps the most important change we need to make is internal. We need to develop what we might call wisdom, about wisdom, understanding about when our human perspective is more valuable than efficient algorithms, and when algorithms can genuinely help us make better decisions. This requires a sophisticated form of discernment that neither rejects technology nor surrenders completely to it, but consciously navigates between its capabilities and limitations. Looking to the future, 2026 may mark the beginning of a new era in the relationship between humanity and technology. It may be the year we collectively recognize that our greatest achievement as a species will not be creating machines that think like us, but developing sufficient wisdom to use these machines in ways that help us become more fully human. It may be the moment when we consciously choose to preserve and cultivate the deepest dimensions of our experience, even while embracing tools that can amplify our capabilities. If these reflections on the future of human wisdom have resonated with your own concerns about the world we are creating, I invite you to join a community of people who refuse to accept that technological progress must come at the expense of human depth. By subscribing to the channel, you will have weekly access to explorations of these fundamental questions that define our epoch, and you will connect with others who share your conviction that we can embrace the future without abandoning what is most precious in our past. This is not a journey any of us can make alone, but together we can cultivate the wisdom necessary to navigate the extraordinary transformations that lie ahead. Subscribe now to continue this essential conversation about how to preserve our deepest humanity in a world of accelerating change. The future of human wisdom is not predetermined. The trends we see today can still be influenced by our conscious choices, but only if we act quickly to create spaces where traditional wisdom can flourish alongside technological innovation. The year 2026 is rapidly approaching, and with it, a choice that will define what it means to be human in the decades to come. The question is not whether we should resist or embrace technological progress, but whether we will have sufficient wisdom to guide this progress toward a future that amplifies rather than diminishes what is deepest and most valuable in human experience.
I love to consider myself a storyteller. As an actor and a filmmaker, it's something that I think of as more than a job. I connect to it on maybe an existential level, on who I am. And one thing I often like to say even is that storytelling is a big part of what makes humans human. So as an expert on the history and the prehistory of what humans are, I'm curious to hear what you think of that statement. If I say storytelling is a big part of what makes humans human, would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yes!
This is the this is the source of our power. We control the world because we can cooperate in much larger numbers than any other animal. And the secret of cooperation of humans is stories. I mean, you can't get to know more than 100 or 200 individuals, but the same story can be known to millions and even billions of people. And as long as everybody believes the same story, they can cooperate. They can agree on norms and values and so forth.
We cannot predict what will be the next stage of human evolution because it depends on the decisions that we make, all of us make, in the coming years. We now have powers almost like divine powers, like the powers of the gods. We can create completely new life forms, we can change ourselves, we can change our bodies, we can change our minds, but the same powers could also destroy us or destroy the whole world. I can't predict what we will do with our powers because it depends on us, on all of us, on the decisions we make. I hope that people will make responsible decisions.
This is something that I learned in like my first meditation course 24 years ago about engagement. It's very easy to engage the mind with certain types of content. It gave me this instruction, okay, just sit there with your eyes closed and focus all your attention on the breath coming in and out of your nostrils. Don't try to control the breath, don't do anything, just feel, is the breath coming in into the breath going out? Now, this was not particularly engaging. And then the algorithms in the mind, they immediately found these videos from my past, all these angry videos and all these lustful videos, which are very engaging, and like I lost complete touch with the reality of the present moment. It's very easy to engage the mind. It's very, very difficult to engage the mind with reality.